Watching a video where someone asked me, please review this video I posted. I promise you that if you do, you will meet and know the killer of 4 people. And also in it, in a pinned comment, it also had see also Gray Hughes Investigator, HLN Special Call-In Show, which actually had a different name, and it was supposed to be the 14th of a month when it was actually the 12th. At 48 minutes, or more accurately, 49 minutes into that video, Ryan from Ohio discussed Bridge Guy's video, genealogy data from DNA and or hair roots, and or if that's missing, you use the phenotype, like if it's curly or straight hair, and or extracting DNA from blood, but this requires, if you're not aware of it, about 100 microliters. That's not a lot. And saying it's harder to do if you mix with another person's blood, which is technically correct, but again, not necessarily all the time. And then Gray Hughes said touch DNA would make it even harder if it was mixed, but touch DNA requires only 10 cells from skin and is actually separatable, so that's probably not correct. And then commented on the D- grade hype special, the one that's called the HLN Special, and also said that another person in that special said, focus on the crime scene and the materials, which is a good idea. Then Ryan, or Brian, or whatever his name is, speculated on what more words were also in the video and audio recording besides down the hill, which, if you're not aware, probably there isn't any. And then assumed or stated you could tell what the weapon is based on wound characteristics or whatever, which isn't necessarily true at all. It's hit or miss, and it's not guaranteed. Now, the video I'm now supposed to be reviewing, that's all of the other video that was linked. The video I'm reviewing has to do with Delphi's Central Indiana weather and or environment, and questions that were posed just asking question style in the video I'm reviewing that's on a YouTube channel. I want to point out the weather that day was at 3 p.m. We're going to use that as a midpoint. A person would have heard or read a news report of what the weather was supposed to be like that day and or had personal experience in the area. Depending, we wouldn't be able to know. But it was 40 degrees Fahrenheit at about 3 p.m. approximately, hovering around there, and it had a 3 mile an hour or around thereabout wind from the southwest, and was all around a pleasant day. It was clear at midnight the night before, clear at 6 a.m., clear at noon, and clear at 6 p.m., and it was only overcast by midnight in the Delphi area, within the zip code. There is historical records of the weather reports and weather outcome taken from that day. Now, they're below the Great Lakes. It's not really the East Coast, so it's Midwest dress, and it's a humid, warm climate. DFA is its listing on some websites, continental weather format, just like you would expect. And now we get to the railroad worker. I'm going to read the just asking questions part in the upper left-hand corner here, and then we'll go on. This was done as a slideshow instead of simply typing it up as a description in the video's description area, where it would have been easy to cut and paste instead of me having to pin together individual frames. A man walking on a high railroad bridge, Monon High Bridge, an abandoned rail bridge, the second tallest wood trestle bridge in Indiana, is acting like they are comfortable walking and confident, unsecured on the bridge. That is a matter of debate, but okay. States, wearing work boots, dark blue zip-up lined vinyl waterproof or windproof windbreaker, wearing layers, loose-fitting jeans with worn-out knees. Okay. Who is the man saying, guys, get down the hill? The voice is altered, the accent pattern, breathing style, and only sound can be changed, but not, quote, the truth. Now, anytime anybody invokes the word truth, I always think that they're subconsciously dodging facts. But here we go. The guys down the hill audio recording. It's been my conclusion for a while that it's simply a recording of someone's voice, and it's been enhanced, unfortunately, because that's what they did with it. And if you want to do at least not have as much alteration, you need to get a hold of the archive.org backup copy of the data. Otherwise, you're never going to get a clean audio recording. But anyway, that's another entire video. But is that altered? Is that trying to hide or change the truth? I don't believe so. So is this person who put up this video asserting that or insinuating it? Not necessarily, but some of the other words I've chopped out of here are like, who does that? And why would somebody do these things? Well, the person he's describing could be a railroad worker, which is what this person's aiming for, or a rail fan or a foamer. It could also be a person who's simply wearing practical clothing. He also includes this snippet. Today, most railroaders dress in practical clothing with very little uniformity. They may wear a baseball-style cap with a railroad logo on it, steel-toed work boots, shirts, pants. Everything's left up to the wearer. Except for carrying identification and maybe occasionally having to wear a badge for security reasons, if you're not aware of it, most railroads and railroad areas, like work areas where you're doing work as a railroader, they don't really require any uniformity, even though that probably would help things. The rest of the video is invoking screenshots of various commentary that are supposed to be significant as observations, and the video goes on and on about this. So I'm going to be covering that as best I can. And again, yes, if you're not aware of it, this is a whole video's worth of stuff for 20 minutes, stick together in basically all of that on the left, and then this here and this here. Here we go. I'm going to read the upper right-hand corner one because it's easier to read and I don't want to have the challenge. I grew up in Bloomington, Indiana until I was about 9. We lived right at the south end of the Myrtle Yard. Every Saturday, my dad and I would trek through and around the yard, going inside boxcars and abandoned cabs, then go on, or caboose, excuse me, then go on to the flooded roundhouse where every time I would fool myself thinking I could reach the giant frog that lived down there. Our journey would end at the, I can't pronounce it or read it, railroad, where my dad would buy chocolate malts for us. They tore out the entire yard and replaced it with a lame-ass modern walking path. It kills me every time someone says they put in a new walking path. It's nice, and they mean it. And then the person comments, traitors. Now this is left under Brooklyn person 35,000, whatever, 5 years ago, posted under a video or a comment on Facebook. The content of this person's YouTube video that's containing these commentaries is indicative of people who are bitter about the changing world of either railroad or rail fan subculture and the railroad world. So, yes, there are people like this who do this, and some of them are very young and some are old. And the implication, even though it's not stated, is that somebody who is a fan of this stuff might look at the Monon Bridge and the trails around it and be bitter about it and decide to punish the population there. Let's move on to the one right in the middle here, which is heavily magnified, and this is the best I could do from the video download I got. Obviously, the original will be better. As a combination of sentimentalist, rails to trails advocate, foamer, and railroader. This is my favorite compilation. Great photos of before and after, and then it gets blurry and I can't read it. Basically, what I'm seeing here in this video, this is just an impression. I'm going to skip reading this because it's hurting my eyes. Are there people out there who are fans of how it used to be in the old days, the old railroad life and the railroad world, that might be bitter enough to go off and try to punish a neighborhood or a community or a city because they converted an old, disused, or closed down rail line into a walking trail? For those of you who don't know, if you have a walking trail put in instead of rails, there's less likelihood of falling down and hurting yourself. Rail lines, by definition, are listed as places you're not supposed to go because they're inherently unsafe. They are work areas. Every railroad line and railroad worker will tell you, for safety reasons, no one should go there unless they have to. Even workers aren't supposed to go there on their off days because it's unnecessary liability and safety issues. So by definition, if you leave a rail line alone, even if it's not used anymore, it's still just as dangerous, except that it doesn't have trains running on it. Period. I mean, nasty stuff is dumped out of trains on the side of the rails. The areas themselves are not meant to be walking paths. They're not meant to be something you can drive a motorcycle on. There's a road next to a lot of them, but not always. And if you don't tear them down, they become a source of, well, potentially toxic material if they're not maintained, because of the various chemicals that are involved in making stuff not rot when they're made of wood and that sort of thing. There's an endless list of things that can go wrong on a railroad line, especially on bridges. And that's one of the reasons the Monon High Bridge is being redone, so that it can become a walking bridge. It will have the vestigial components of being a train trestle, but it must be altered so that it's a walkable pathway. That was in the works beforehand. In fact, some people have accused, which doesn't make sense, have accused people in Delphi of arranging this incident so that they could get funds to fix it, which doesn't make any damn sense. But the point here is, could somebody be angry at them for doing an improvement? Now, I've had this conversation with rail people in Portland. By the way, they do all wear blue jeans and blue overcoats or whatever's available, whatever will work. Something cheap. It's utilitarian clothing. It's not a uniform. You get the idea. And they will wear a baseball cap, or they will wear a comfortable cap, because baseball caps are considered uncomfortable, because it's more practical than wearing dark glasses and safer. Don't know if you know that. Anybody who's worked outside might know that already, depending on where you are. Depending on whether or not you do a lot of work in the early morning and late afternoon, or during wintertime, the low sun will hurt your eyes, so you need to have a bill on your cap. So anyway, I've had conversations with them about it, and they've all said the same things I've explained to you. And also areas that are no longer used, they advocate ripping them up and recycling the material. Better that than to leave the stuff there. They would rather see old railroad ties pulled up and the area reconditioned or mined, essentially, for all the materials like the gravel to do a new rail line and maintain rail lines, because they always have to be maintained. That's all railroad workers do, besides running the trains and running switches, is fixing the railroad. It's a chronic process. So none of them I've ever run into were in favor of retaining an old line for sentimental reasons. I just haven't found any, I guess. So what is my conclusion about this? Someone asked me, or said, please review this video. I promise that if you do, you'll meet and know the killer of the four people. 2 incidents, 2 girls each, involving near rail lines or near bridges, is the presumption here. Could it be a railroad worker or a rail fan or whatever? Yeah, but it could be literally anybody else who's also a person who might walk around. It is a slightly higher likelihood of it being a railroad worker. Okay. Also, exactly the same percentage of likelihood it being a homeless person or a hobo, a true hobo. There are cases of, well, there's a guy you can look up named Sidetrack, which would fit the bill here. Railroad based homeless people do a completely different pattern of behavior than road or bicycle based homeless people or car camping types. Rail based ones, we call them hobos, but they're not really hobos anymore, would fit the bill for being your killer. But that would also make it, I'm going to tell you right now, if it's a hobo, a real one, you're never going to find this person. They're never, ever going to go back there. Because hobos have an absolute habitual pathological need to get away from, well, trouble. They don't like, quote unquote, heat being brought down upon them. None of them I've ever run into are interested in this kind of crap. And if any of them are, they're immediately outed by other hobos, because they got to get rid of them because they're a threat to them having, quote, their good spot. I spent 10 years being homeless. I do actually know a little of what I'm talking about. My conclusion for the person who asked me to do this, I don't believe you're on the right track necessarily unless you include hobos, but they would have to be what we would call rogue hobos, or the bad kind, or bad news. We just call them that. That's all I got to add to this, if that was anything. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with that, and I hope that this has been useful to people watching, and if it hasn't, downvote it.